trust. They say it's the foundation of every marriage. For 8 years, I believed Jack and I had something unbreakable. Our life in Silicon Valley was picture perfect, at least that's what our Instagram followers thought. The sprawling modern house in Palo Alto, the matching Teslas in the driveway, the charity galas, the startup success stories. We were living the dream. Or so I thought. The first crack appeared on an ordinary Tuesday in September. I was sitting in my corner office at Thompson Digital Marketing, scrolling through my phone. That's when Ryan's message popped up. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. My heart raced as I quickly closed the notification. I glanced around, paranoid that someone might have seen. But I was alone, safe behind my glass walls and privacy screens. I hadn't meant for any of this to happen. Ryan Cooper walked into my life 3 months ago at a tech conference in San Francisco. Tall, confident, with that perfect salt and pepper hair that screamed success. He wasn't trying to hide his interest in me. The way he looked at me across the crowded conference hall made me feel seen. Really seen. Not just as Jack Thompson's wife. Not as the marketing executive. But as Emma. Just Emma. When was the last time Jack had looked at me that way? These days, he was always buried in his laptop, building his empire. Our conversations had become status updates about meetings and stock options. Our date nights had turned into networking events. Even our vacations revolved around tech conferences and investor meetings. Ryan was different. He listened when I talked about my dreams beyond the corporate ladder. He didn't check his phone every 5 minutes during dinner. He made me laugh, real, uncontrolled laughter that I hadn't experienced in years. The kind that makes your stomach hurt and tears roll down your cheeks. The affair started slowly. Coffee meetings that ran longer than scheduled. Late-night texts about work that turned personal. Networking dinners that had nothing to do with networking. I told myself it was innocent. Just friendship. Just attention I craved. Until it wasn't. The first kiss happened in the elevator of the Four Seasons after a particularly long dinner. Ryan had insisted on walking me to my car. We were alone, the air electric with unspoken tension. He didn't ask permission. He just pulled me close and kissed me like I was the oxygen he needed to breathe. And I let him. God help me, I let him. After that night, everything changed. The guilt was overwhelming at first. Every time Jack touched me, I felt like my skin was crawling with lies. But Ryan's messages were like a drug. Each ping of my phone sent a thrill through my body. Each secret meeting made me feel more alive than I had in years. "Who's that?" Jack asked one evening, noticing my rapid texting. "Just work," I said, flashing what I hoped was a casual smile. But my hands were shaking, and my heart was ding so loud I was sure he could hear it. He just nodded and went back to his laptop. That easy trust felt like a knife in my chest. Ryan became bolder as weeks passed. He started sending flowers to my office, always with innocent cards about business partnerships. He booked us private dining rooms at Michelin-starred restaurants. He rented us suites at luxury hotels where no one would recognize us. Each time, I told myself it would be the last. Each time, I went back for more. Sarah, my best friend and VP of marketing, was the first to notice the changes in me. "You seem different," she said over our weekly lunch. Happier maybe? But also, distracted. I brushed it off, claiming it was just work stress. But Sarah knew me too well. She gave me that look, the one that said she could see right through my lies. "Whatever you're doing, Emma, be careful," she warned. "Perfect lives can shatter faster than you think." I should have listened to her. I should have seen the warning signs. But I was too caught up in the intoxicating thrill of it all. Ryan made me feel young again. Desired. Alive. Then came the night that changed everything. Jack had prepared dinner, my favorite chicken Alfredo. The table was set with candles and wine. A peace offering for another cancelled date night the week before. But I was already committed to meeting Ryan. I walked in, mumbled something about not being hungry, and rushed upstairs to change. The hurt in Jack's eyes should have stopped me. It should have been enough to snap me out of this madness. But it wasn't. Ryan was waiting at our usual spot, a suite at the Four Seasons. He had champagne chilling and rose petals scattered across the bed. "Leave him," he whispered against my neck. "We could have this every night." The words sent shivers down my spine. But something felt off. Maybe it was the way he said it. Too practiced. Too perfect. I started noticing other things too. The way he sometimes checked his phone during our intimate moments. The mysterious calls he had to take in the hallway. The fact that I knew so little about his life outside of our affair. One afternoon, I decided to surprise him at his office. The receptionist gave me a strange look when I asked for Ryan Cooper. "I'm sorry, which department did you say he was in?" My stomach dropped. "He's a real estate developer," I said, my voice suddenly unsure. "We don't have anyone by that name working here," she replied. "Are you sure you have the right building?" The world tilted on its axis. I left before she could ask any more questions. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my car. Who was Ryan Cooper? Everything I thought I knew about him started unraveling. The business cards he'd given me. The stories about his deals and projects. Had it all been lies? I tried calling him, but the phone went straight to voicemail. My messages went unanswered. Panic started setting in. What had I done? What had I risked everything? G4? That night, I couldn't sleep. Jack's steady breathing beside me felt like an accusation. He trusted me completely. He had no idea that I'd been systematically destroying our marriage. No idea that I'd fallen for a man who might not even be who he claimed to be. The next morning, I arrived at work early, determined to do some digging. I used every resource at my disposal: LinkedIn, company databases, social media. Ryan Cooper seemed to exist only in fragments. No consistent work history. No verifiable credentials. Just a ghost who had walked into my life and turned it upside down. Sarah found me crying in my office an hour later. One look at my face and she knew. "Oh, Emma," she sighed, closing the door behind her. "What have you done?" I told her everything. The affair. The lies. The discovery that Ryan might be a fraud. She listened without judgment, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "Emma, there's something you need to know about Ryan Cooper," she said finally. My blood ran cold at her tone. "He's done this before." Sarah pulled out her tablet and started showing me articles. News stories. Social media posts. Court records. Ryan Cooper was indeed a predator. He targeted successful women in tech. Married women with something to lose. He would seduce them, gather compromising information, and then use it for blackmail or financial gain. Some of his victims had lost everything: marriages, careers, reputations. I felt sick. physically sick. The champagne, the hotels, the perfectly timed compliments. It had all been a carefully orchestrated game. And I had played right into his hands. What am I going to do? I whispered, more to myself than to Sarah. You need to tell Jack, she said firmly. Before Ryan does. The thought made my stomach lurch. How do you tell your husband that you've not only betrayed him but also potentially put everything he's worked for at risk? As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A message from Ryan. Meet me tonight. We need to talk about your husband's company. The threat was clear. This wasn't about love or passion anymore. It had never been. I was just another target. Another notch in his belt. Another life he could destroy for his own gain. I stared at my reflection in the office window. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. How had I let this happen? How had I risked everything for someone who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end? The weight of my choices crashed down on me like a tidal wave. Jack. My sweet, trusting Jack. Who had never given me reason to doubt his love. Who had supported every dream, celebrated every victory. Who still looked at me like I was his whole world. Even when I didn't deserve it. I picked up my phone with trembling hands. I had to tell him. Had to try to save what was left of our marriage. But before I could dial, another message from Ryan appeared. By the way, I'm stopping by your house tonight. Time to have a chat with Jack. My world stopped. Spinning. The game was over. And I had lost everything that mattered. I sat in my car outside our house for what felt like hours. The lights were on inside, casting a warm glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Jack's Tesla was in the driveway. He was home early for once. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I had to warn him. Had to tell him before Ryan arrived. But as I reached for the door handle, another car pulled up. A sleek black Porsche. Ryan. My heart stopped. He stepped out, looking immaculate in his tailored suit. The same suit he'd worn the first time we met. Now it felt like a costume. A carefully chosen prop in his elaborate con. I watched, paralyzed, as he walked up to our front door. Each step felt like a nail in the coffin of my marriage. The security camera caught his movement. The doorbell rang. Through the glass, I could see Jack walking to answer it. Something snapped inside me. I couldn't let this happen. Not like this. I jumped out of my car and ran toward the house. Jack. I called out. But I was too late. The door was already open. Ryan and Jack stood face to face in our doorway. You must be Jack Thompson, Ryan's voice was smooth as silk. We need to talk about your wife. Jack's expression remained neutral, but I saw his jaw tighten. Emma, he said, finally noticing me behind Ryan. What's going on? Ryan turned to me, a predatory smile on his face. Why don't you tell him, Emma? Jack, My voice cracked. The words stuck in my throat like broken glass. Perhaps I should start, Ryan said, stepping into our house uninvited. Your wife and I have been having an affair. The words hung in the air like poison. Jack's face didn't change. He didn't flinch. Didn't react. And somehow that was worse than any explosion of anger. I know, Jack said quietly. Both Ryan and I froze. What? I whispered. I've known for weeks, Jack continued, his voice eerily calm. Every hotel meeting. Every dinner date. Every lie. He pulled out his phone and showed us photos. Photos of us at restaurants, entering hotels, kissing in elevators. My world crumbled around me. But that's not why you're here, is it, Mr. Cooper? Jack's tone changed. Became harder. Colder. Or should I say, Richard Maxwell. Now it was Ryan's turn to freeze. What did you say? Richard Maxwell. Born in Detroit. Changed your name in 2015 after your first series of cons. Jack walked to his laptop and pulled up documents. Court records. Police reports. Restraining orders. You've been busy, Richard. Very busy. Ryan's confident facade cracked slightly. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Jack smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. 7 marriages destroyed in the last 3 years. Millions embezzled through various schemes. 2 pending investigations by the FBI's Cybercrimes Unit. Should I continue? I stood there, watching the exchange in stunned silence. Jack hadn't just known ABO. UT the affair. He'd been 10 steps ahead the entire time. How? I managed to whisper. Did you really think I wouldn't protect what's mine? Jack's eyes met mine. The pain in them made me flinch. The moment you started acting differently, I hired people. Good people. People who know how to dig deep. He turned back to Ryan, who had lost all traces of smugness. You picked the wrong target this time. You thought you could use my wife to get to my company? My technology? My life? Jack's laugh was cold. I've been building digital fortresses since before you learned to con your first victim. Ryan took a step back. This is harassment, he sputtered. I'll sue you for defamation. Go ahead, Jack challenged. I'm sure the FBI would love to have you in one place long enough to serve their warrants. That's when Ryan's brother Marcus burst through the door. I hadn't even noticed him waiting outside. He was bigger than Ryan, more physically imposing. You think you're so smart? Marcus growled, advancing toward Jack. Let's see how smart you are with a broken face. But Jack didn't move. Didn't even blink. Sarah, he called out. And suddenly Sarah was there, walking down our stairs with her phone held high. Live streaming to the company's entire network, she announced. Plus several FBI agents who are very interested in this conversation. Marcus stopped in his tracks. Ryan's face had gone pale. You set this up, he accused. You knew I was coming. Of course I did, Jack replied. You're not the only one who can play games, Richard. The difference is, I play to win. I looked at Sarah, betrayal stinging fresh. You knew? She met my eyes with a mix of sadness and determination. I had to protect you from yourself, Emma. When Jack came to me with proof of who Ryan really was, I couldn't let you destroy everything for a lie. The room started spinning. Everyone had known. Everyone had been playing their parts. While I thought I was living some grand romance, I had actually been the biggest fool of all. Get out, Jack's voice cut through my thoughts. He was addressing Ryan and Marcus. If I ever see either of you again, if you ever try to contact Emma or anyone else at my company, the FBI won't be the only ones you have to worry about. Ryan opened his mouth to argue, but Marcus grabbed his arm. Let's go, the bigger man muttered. It's over. They left without another word. The sound of the Porsche's engine fading into the night was the only goodbye. Sarah quietly excused herself, leaving me alone with Jack. The husband I had betrayed. The man who had protected me even when I was destroying us. Jack, I started, but he held up his hand. Don't, he said softly. Just don't. He walked to the window, staring out at the perfectly manicured lawn we'd spent so much time designing together. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I gave you everything you wanted, it would be enough. His voice cracked slightly. I guess I was wrong. It wasn't about you, I whispered. It was never about you. That's the problem, isn't it? He turned to face me, and the pain in his eyes took my breath away. It should have been about us. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being us. I took a step toward him, but he backed away. I protected you tonight because despite everything, I still love you. But love isn't enough anymore. He picked up his keys from the counter. I'll be staying at the Four Seasons. The irony isn't lost on me. As he walked to the door, I found my voice again. What happens now? He paused, hand on the doorknob. Now? Now we both face the consequences of your choices. The door closed behind him with a soft click. I stood alone in our perfect house, surrounded by the evidence of our perfect life, and finally understood what it meant to lose everything that mattered. The silence was deafening. The walls that had witnessed our happiest moments now stood as silent judges of my betrayal. I sank to the floor, let the tears come, and wondered if anything would ever be right again. The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers and paperwork. Jack moved his things out while I was at work. The house felt hollow without him. Every room held memories that now felt tainted. Our wedding photos still hung on the walls, mocking me with frozen smiles from happier times. The tech community is smaller than most people realize. News travels fast, especially scandalous news about a power couple's implosion. I could feel the whispers following me at work, see the sidelong glances in meetings. My inbox filled with emails from concerned colleagues. Each one felt like another small punishment. Sarah tried to help in her own way. The board still supports you, she assured me over coffee. Jack made sure your position wasn't compromised. Of course he did. Even now, he was protecting me. It made everything worse. I threw myself into work, trying to drown the guilt in endless meetings and presentations. But every time I walked past Jack's old office, now empty and dark, my heart would clench painfully in my chest. He had moved the company's headquarters across town. A clean break, the lawyers called it. Ryan disappeared completely. The FBI caught up with him in Miami, where he was already working his next con. The news brought me no satisfaction, only a hollow reminder of my own gullibility. The woman who prided herself on being smart and successful had fallen for the oldest trick in the book. One rainy evening, as I sat alone in my kitchen, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Turn on the news. It was Sarah. Channel 5 was running a special report. Silicon Valley scandal, the man who conned the tech elite. Ryan's face filled the screen. They had footage of his arrest, interviews with other women he'd deceived, a detailed exposé of his criminal enterprise. My hands shook as I watched. There were others. So many others. Successful women who had fallen for his act, lost their marriages, their reputations, their self-respect. I wasn't special. I was just another Mark. The reporter mentioned Jack. Sources say it was tech mogul Jack Thompson who finally brought Cooper down, providing authorities with crucial evidence of his criminal activities. Of course, Jack hadn't just protected me. He'd protected all the women who might have come after me. That was who he was. Who he'd always been. I found myself driving to the Four Seasons that night. Sat in the parking lot for hours, staring at the lights in the windows, wondering which room was his, what he was doing, if he ever thought about me. But I didn't go in. I had lost that right. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, the same day of the week I first met Ryan. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jack's terms were more than fair. Generous even. He left me the house. A substantial settlement. My dignity, what was left of it. His signature was already there. Bold and clear. No hesitation. No second thoughts. Just one final kindness I didn't deserve. I signed my name next to his, watching as my tears smudged the ink slightly. Our 8 years of marriage, reduced to a few pages of legal jargon. And just like that, it was over. Sarah came over that night with wine and Chinese food. Found me sitting in the dark, staring at our wedding album. "You need to stop torturing yourself," she said gently. "What I need is a time machine," I replied. She didn't laugh. "He asks about you," she said after a while. My heart jumped. "He does? He wants to make sure you're okay." Of course he did. Even now. Even after everything. Is he? I couldn't finish the question. Sarah understood anyway. He's throwing himself into work. The new AI project is taking off. The investors are thrilled. She paused. He's not dating, if that's what you're wondering. I nodded, trying to ignore the relief I felt. What right did I have to feel relieved? "I saw the ring is gone," Sarah noted. I looked down at my bare left hand. The tan line was still visible. A ghost of what I'd lost. "It didn't feel right to keep wearing it," I whispered. "Not after. After you broke his heart?" Sarah finished. Her voice wasn't unkind, but the words stung. "Yes," I admitted. After that. We sat in silence for a while. The city lights twinkling through the windows. "You know what the worst part is?" I said finally. "What?" "He would have forgiven me. If I had come to him first. If I had been honest. He would have fought for us." The truth of it burned in my chest. "But you didn't," Sarah reminded me. "No," I agreed. "I didn't." And that was the real tragedy. Not Ryan's con. Not the public scandal. But the fact that I had thrown away something real. Something precious. For an illusion. The next morning, I woke up to news that Jack's company had secured a major government contract. His photo was everywhere. He looked good. Tired, maybe. But strong. Moving. Forward. While I was still stuck in the wreckage of what I'd done. I drafted dozens of emails to him that day. Deleted every one. What could I possibly say? Sorry I fell for a con man? Sorry I threw away our life together? Sorry I didn't realize what I had until it was gone? The words felt inadequate. Empty. Like everything else in my life now. That evening, I packed up our wedding album. The photos from our honeymoon in Bali. The silly selfies from lazy Sunday mornings. All the evidence of a happiness I had taken for granted. Put them in a box in the attic. Some memories are too painful to keep close. As I closed the attic door, my phone buzzed with a text. For a moment, my heart stopped. But it wasn't Jack. It was just a news alert. Another story about Ryan's victims coming forward. Another reminder of my mistakes. I deleted the alert, turned off my phone, and finally allowed myself to cry. Not for what I'd lost, but for what I'd thrown away. The trust I'd broken. The love I'd betrayed. The life I'd destroyed. All for a lie that had seemed so real. Until the truth shattered everything. 6 months passed like a slow-motion car crash. Each day brought new challenges. New reminders of what I'd lost. The divorce was finalized. The gossip eventually died down. Life moved on, as it always does. But I remained stuck in the aftermath of my choices. Then came the invitation. The annual Tech Innovation Awards. A black tie event I couldn't avoid. As head of marketing, my presence was required. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I would have to face Jack in public. Sarah helped me choose a dress. Simple black. Elegant but understated. You look beautiful, she said. But all I saw in the mirror was guilt. The woman who had everything. And threw it all away. The ballroom was packed when I arrived. Silicon Valley's elite in their finest. Champagne flowing. Deals being made in corner conversations. I felt eyes on me as I made my way through the crowd. Some sympathetic. Most judgmental. A few openly hostile. Then I saw him. Jack stood near the stage. Looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. He was talking to a group of investors. That familiar confident smile on his face. A young woman stood close to him. Her hand resting lightly on his arm. The sight felt like a physical blow. That's his new VP of Operations, Sarah whispered. Appearing beside me with 2 glasses of champagne. Jessica Chen. Stanford MBA. Brilliant mind. Are they? I couldn't finish the question. No, Sarah said firmly. But not for lack of trying on her part. I took a large sip of champagne. Trying to calm my nerves. That's when Jack looked up. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, time stopped. All the noise faded away. Then he nodded slightly. A professional acknowledgement. And turned back to his conversation. The award ceremony began. I sat with Sarah. As far from Jack's table as possible. But I couldn't help watching him. Way he commanded attention. The respect he'd earned. The life he'd built from the ruins I'd left behind. When they announced his company had won Innovation of the Year, the room erupted in applause. Jack took the stage. Gracious and humble as always. This award belongs to my entire team, he said. We've faced challenges this year. But we've emerged stronger. His eyes found mine for a split second. Sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the greatest growth. The after-party was in full swing. When I decided to leave, I couldn't take any more. Fake smiles and pointed conversations. But as I waited for my car, a familiar voice stopped me. Leaving so soon? Jack stood there. hands in his pockets, looking at me with unreadable eyes. "Congratulations on the award," I managed. "You deserve it." "Do I?" he asked softly. "Or did I just get better at protecting myself?" The words hung between us, heavy with meaning. "Jack, don't," he said. "We don't need to do this." But something in me needed him to know. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "For everything." He was quiet for a long moment. "I know you are," he finally said. "That's what makes it worse." He stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne. The same one I'd bought him last Christmas. "Do you know what hurts the most, Emma?" I shook my head, afraid to speak. "That you didn't trust me enough to tell me you were unhappy. That you looked for answers in someone else's lies, instead of talking to your husband." His voice cracked slightly. "I would have moved heaven and earth for you. All you had to do was ask." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "I didn't know what I wanted," I admitted. "I was lost, and Ryan." "Ryan was a symptom," Jack cut in. "Not the cause." We lost each other long before he showed up. My car arrived, but neither of us moved. "Are you happy?" I asked suddenly. "With the new company? The success?" He smiled sadly. "I'm getting there. One day at a time." He paused. "Are you?" "No," I answered honestly. "But I'm learning to live with my choices." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's all any of us can do." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Emma?" "Yes?" "I hope you find what you're looking for." Then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd inside. I sat in my car, watching the city lights blur through my tears, remembering the way we used to be, the dreams we shared, the future we planned. All gone now, like smoke in the wind. But maybe Jack was right. Maybe all we can do is learn to live with our choices, accept the consequences, and hope that somewhere down the line, we find peace with the paths we've chosen, even if those paths led us away from the ones we love.